We should start with all fingers together. I think if you've got very, very little kids, maybe you have a different approach with your maybe just first finger, I don't know. I like this way because it automatically creates a good left-hand shape. Then the next thing is, we're now halfway through the Vamoosh book, so this is where we're now in the second term, beginning of the second term. They are fully versed in the bow now. They've done quite a lot of open string pieces. So now we're going to introduce the second finger. So now what will happen is you'll get a lot of fuzz and noise for a few weeks, because they're not pressing down hard enough, or they're putting it in the wrong place, or they're confused, or the bow is all over the place because they're concentrating on their left hand now. So for a few weeks, you will probably hear something that you're not terribly proud of, and you're not going to film anytime soon. But don't despair, okay? Don't think that you're doing anything wrong or anything like that. All that's happening is that they are getting used to the choreography of it all. And they're just going to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and then over time, it's quite magical how it happens. The sound just starts to come into focus, and they're all sitting there and actually starting to play. The first few weeks, I have to remind myself, yes, Thomas, it sounds bad for a couple of weeks, but it will get better. The important thing is that they are doing what you're asking them to do in terms of where they place their fingers, and then you're repeating the patterns over and over. And the next 5 or 6 pieces, we're just going to be repeating this pattern. Whether they realize it or not doesn't matter. Ideally, they don't realize it, because it's a game. It's another sort of series of exercises. So we have morning sunshine, and when we've done that to death, we have afternoon rain. And when they have been doing this over and over again, they think they're playing 2 different pieces, but of course they're not. They're just playing. This one is just going to float the bow arm a little bit more. So in a lesson, one way to give the kids the sense of control in their life is to ask them what they want to do. Do you want to play it on the A string? Do you want to play on the D string? Do you want to play morning sunshine? Do you want to play afternoon rain? And if you've got a large group of kids, you can really portion it out and separate and break it up. And you can get a lot of mileage out of it. And all the time, they are just getting used to the physicality of doing something that's quite awkward and difficult. But because they're repeating it so much, it's solidifying in their bodies and in their minds, and preparing them for the rest of the book, effectively. Is there anything else about this that anybody has any questions about this one?
You can also, the games to prepare it, putting the fingers on their tippy toes on the body of the instrument and getting them to lift and tap the correct finger on the body of the instrument while saying the finger numbers. And then, for example, just doing it like this initially and making sure they can identify which one's 1 and 2, and think about, are you teaching independent in the fingers, or are you teaching in blocks? What are you teaching? Why are you teaching it that way? Thinking about finger pressure. Are they, like Thomas said, you're going to get children that have got no sense of any contact. So, getting them to squeeze their own hand and then release and release and release until they've got nothing, and finding something in the middle so that they're aware of how much pressure they need for the fingers to make a decent sound, and you can experiment with that. And so you can sing it, you can tap it, you can clap it, you can finger tap.
That's absolutely right. Sorry, I left out some things. I would sing this one long before we try to play it, because I want them not to be looking at their fingers, not the music. So we do try to memorize the tune first. And so we will sing, and then we'll do a little bit of that as well. Yes, thank you for reminding me. It's just, yeah.
Apologies for it sounding a little bit out there, but I just thought of this. If you had a more advanced student and you loaded that up through like a music speech changer app, which I'd use on Android, you could move that up to semitones, and then you could actually play second position with the advanced student.
Yeah.
As then they'd have to do a 4th finger on the G string for each of the open string, and just get them to kind of make friends with that, like as a ring, or
Yeah.
Because you've got kind of the idea of all this is to like what are the other things
Yeah.
you could do.
And in fact, what I do in my lessons is I put it onto other strings as well. So we'll do all the other strings as well. Cellists never play on the C string. So once we've established the left-hand shape, we move straight on. This is another one where you can use the rests to shout out the notes. Now, I know you're all familiar with this stuff, right? So we don't need to play it, is that true? So we do a little bit of a dance. Third finger. No fingers. 1, 2, and again. Third finger. First finger. Ending. etc. That's the idea. Anything else you want to say about that, Rachel?
No, just exactly that. 2, 2, 2, 2. Put your third finger down. 3, 3, 3, 3.
Anyone else got a version of that one?
You've got it.
Okay, so those two pieces have started on the second finger. Now we're going to start on the D string. This is super easy to teach. You can teach in about 30 seconds. 1, touch, 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 and D. Guns pointing upwards. This one starts with the third finger. So we've been having pieces that start with the second finger, then we started on the D string. This one starts on your third finger. This is an absolute riot. Does anybody not know the tune to Hokey Cokey? So with this one, the reward, we're talking about rewards, right? The reward for this one is they get to sing, and when they sing, they're allowed to make as much noise as they want. And they must dance, and they must wave their arms around, and they must move, and they get rid of any excess energy as possible, right? I ask them to disturb the classrooms next door. Don't tell them that, but I want them to feel completely free. But at the end of the song, they must replace everything back into position, third finger on the D string, and they must play the first note after the singing with that absolutely perfectly. Okay, that's the price for the reward, if you know what I mean. And it sounds like this. This is a Vicky Miller thing. Here we go. Also, the other thing I would just mention, I have kids pretty much standing up, if they're playing the violin, standing up the whole lesson. I think it's quite a good way. I have a seat there to keep them in control, like sit down just to make sure they don't wander around. But whenever they're playing, I like them to stand. It might not be the same, but that's my preference. Can anyone tell me what is difficult for a child who's been working up to this piece? What is difficult about this piece? The last line, D, D, 1, 2, 3. That's what they've never done before. And that, for us, we forget how hard that is, but it's actually really, it's a bit fiddly. So they're going to go, and I might even ask the kids that, which line is the hardest? Look at that and tell me which line is the hardest one, and then they usually always identify the last line. So you're getting them to lead the lessons by identifying, oh, that's going to be the challenging bit. So I say, okay, we're going to practice that first then, aren't we? So let's practice that first, and then we will do that. And sometimes in a lesson I'll say, I'm going to give you 1 minute to practice the last line. And I might help 1 or 2 kids if they're really struggling. But most of the time, they go, oh good, I've got me time. I can do this myself on my own. I'm going to practice that bit. And they nearly always do. And it's a good way to get them into their own practice mode for when they go home as well. So they can practice practicing in their lesson, if you like. So I love to do that in every lesson, just give them just a little window, and it's amazing how much they can do in that tiny little time when they have the space just to think for themselves. As long as you're not asking them to do anything that's difficult.
The other thing I was going to say is that if you've noticed with a lot of repertoire that is used in string teaching, they introduce the fingers really gradually. So you have introduce 1, and they do that for a few pieces, and then 2, and then of course what you end up with is children that are like miles away from the instrument because they've never had to have their fingers and hand shapes ready for doing anything else. So this is why this is really good, is because Thomas is starting also on a third finger, like he said. So you're already establishing such a good hand shape and not always going up the scale. or starting on an open string. So it's encouraging all of those things. And the other thing I was going to say is I often, I go into pairs and get the children to be one to be the bow and one to be the left hand. So they are literally just focusing on that. And one of them is just focusing on contact with the string. So they're both doing things, but they're not having to micromanage each skill.
Yeah, pairing up. There's lots you can do in pairing up. Dark horse is another improvisation one. So at this point, they will have all their fingers. So now you can have all their fingers. They will have the use of all their fingers. So you can start to tell them to improvise with all of their fingers. What else? Sometimes if you start shouting A1, A, or something like that, or shouting 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, they don't know which string you're on. So this might be a good opportunity to say, what note will I get if I put one finger on, or this is how I like to say it. If I put one finger on A, what note would that be? Try to give it away, and then they feel so proud of themselves when they get it right. And then if one on A is a B, what's one on D? And this is where they get really confused, But it starts to teach them that, oh, okay, so every finger has a letter name as well, and you're starting to build that block gently as well. They don't have to understand it completely, but just as long as you start spoon feeding a little bit, drip feeding is the word, sorry, drip feeding a little bit of knowledge into their lesson, then it will start to fall into place. By the time they get to music college, they might know what key they're playing in.
There are cameras and microphones in this building.
Where are we again? Oh, the Royal Academy. For anyone who's not familiar with this tune, it's quite well known. Now with this one, I would say to them, this is how I teach Twinkle Twinkle. I say, what tune is this? Now, amazingly, nearly all of them know the answer to that. Okay? I say, what tune is this? And they'll start singing it, maybe. I'm not going to show them the music. So then I'll say, what is the next note? Little star. How do we play that? You have 30 seconds to work out what the next note is. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. How are you going to play that? And they'll try a lot of different things. Maybe you can take some answers from them. I think it's an E string. Okay, let's try it. Twinkle, twinkle, little. And you get them guessing a bit like that. And then they start to work out, oh, I see, it's one step higher. So I'm going to use one finger for the one step higher. So you're using another way of learning, retrospectively learning. They already know the tune, they know how it sounds, but they don't know how to play it. And then you can just go on from there. So once they worked out that, how do I play this note? Is it higher or lower than this one, the one before it? It's lower. Okay, so what do you have to do then? And then they start to retrospectively build in the knowledge. So you're using what they already know and sort of fitting it together. And it's just another way of teaching the lesson in a, so you're not using the same pattern every week, because the worst thing you can get into this sort of predictable pattern. So you want to try things different all the time, and then they get excited about how they're going to learn this next tune.
It's about awakening the senses. And I talk about it a lot. It's like this idea of 3D learning. It's like to shove a piece of music in front of a child is so neglectful of their senses. And ultimately, music is a felt and heard thing, not a visual one. We're not looking at music. Music, it doesn't sound like anything when you see it on a page. It's all about the other senses. So to teach like that and to give them an awareness of what higher and lower means, or what does the same mean? Close your eyes. If I play these two notes, are they the same or are they different? They don't need to be able to say higher or lower, essentially or initially, but they certainly need to be able to identify what's same and different. That's what building musicians is. Musicians aren't people that can just recite stuff off from a page. Musicians are people that internalize it and then speak it through their instruments. And that's what that type of teaching does.
Good. Any other questions about that one? I don't think we need it. So with this Twinkle Twinkle is on the other side to Footprints in the Snow. So once they've learned Twinkle Twinkle, then I can show them the music. Then they can, again, retrospectively look at what they worked out already, spot the patterns in the music, always, and then I'll say, Footprints in the Snow uses all of the same notes as Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I'm not going to have to teach you anything about how to play these notes. So, and if they're in groups, I might say, you guys, you're going to work out the notes of the first line. Are there any two lines the same? Are there any two lines that are exactly the same? Yes, thank you.
Panic in the room. I don't know.
Are there any two lines that are nearly the same?
I love adults.
Is there an odd one out? Is there an odd one out line? It's the second line, starts on the A string. Look at that. And it almost, yeah? So then you're giving them the tools to teach themselves, okay? That's the point. Every teacher of an instrument teaches their way out of their student. You want your students to be able to teach themselves at some point, okay? I know we're early stages here, but you've got to get them into that habit of understanding they are responsible for their learning, and you're giving them all the tools they need, and then having a bit of knowledge. It's like anyone who's ever done one of those ridiculous question, they ask, what's the capital of France? And you feel so proud of yourself because you know the answer, even if it's the dumbest, stupid, easiest question in the world. It makes you feel good to have that knowledge. I know something, Kids who've left a lesson, leave a lesson with a sense that they know something or have learned something. It's just so empowering, and it makes them feel really good about themselves. So they know everything they need to know already to teach themselves this piece. So let them. And then this is another example. I don't do this in lessons. Personally, I'll say, if any kid wants to learn it, I'll say, well, please surprise me next week. Because they know how it goes. And I'll say, and this is a differentiation thing again, because if you've got 30 children, and some kids are just really gagging to move on, let them. They can do that. No one's going to get hurt if they start playing pieces ahead of schedule. So I'll say, play this for us next week. And if they've practiced it and they've learned it, then that'll be the treat when everyone else is packing up, or at the end of the lesson, I'll say, well, let's listen to what so-and-so has done. And hopefully it will inspire some of the kids to do more as well. At this point, we would have started differentiating between one on the A string gives you a B, so we might sing this with the letter names. A, D, 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 B, B, A, D, 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 D. You could say 1, 1 if you want, or E, E, D. It's okay to sort of mix it up a little bit. I'm not afraid to do that if it gets the message across. The second two lines are very, very light and small bows, but keep on the string. My personal belief is a bow should be in contact with the string unless you're doing some big gesture with a retake or an up bow sort of thing. I think it really promotes a nice, good contact if you allow the bow to rest on the string as much as possible. And encourage them to use small bows. And I will do a retake here. Yes, that's right. And then when they get to the end of this line, this is when we're going to go on a space walk. We're going to touch the string, but we're not going to press down, and we're going to slide up as high as we dare, and then down again. On the cello, it's much more effective because you hear the harmonics much better. And I call it catching shooting stars. We'll hear all the harmonics as we go. It's that sort of glassy sound. So what that does, of course, you can see it's encouraging this, which I'm not very good at because I'm not a violinist. But I was
going to say your technique's better than a lot of people I've seen that are professionals on the violin. So I wouldn't.
Did you get that? Did you get that guy?
Delete that. What else does that promote, just out of interest for us all? What else does that little exercise?
Smooth shifting.
It's a good preparation skill for shifting. What else?
Mm-hmm.
Not pressing the thumb.
Right, exactly. Not squeezing the neck of the violin. What else? Could be vibrato, yeah. I mean, a prerequisite, yeah. What else? Dynamics. This one? Yeah, okay.
Or loud and soft.
Oh, loud and soft. Okay, yeah, no. I was just thinking about the little glissando exercise. Which one? But yes, that's absolutely true.
What's the last one, Rachel?
Well, there's hundreds, I think. That's the thing. I think it helps them get to grips with like the map of the instrument in terms of like where does first position feel like. It helps them to like refine that position. It helps them keep the fingers over the strings in order to make sure that no fingers are hiding away or looking at the floor.
Keeping the violin in place.
Exactly, the weight of the head has got the violin.
Yeah.
Checking good posture, freedom in the right arm. Yeah, so many things.
If I may say something, also I use it in a little ensemble, and at the beginning, the first rehearsal, I say to them, okay, let's slide up and down. They were all quite confused, like, are we allowed to do that? And then they began to have fun, and the concert was a great.
And then they don't want to do anything else, in my experience. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I often don't tell them about the beginning of the piece until we've already learned the whole piece, because the beginning of the piece is when we land on Mars. And I want them to make as much noise as they dare, with scrubbing and sliding and just being quite a little bit aggressive. But when it goes bom chicka bom ching bom, they've got to stop. Bom chicka bom ching bom chicka, and then they get ready to play. So apart from all of the other little things that they're learning in this piece, one thing that they're getting out of this piece is stamina, because whilst it's only however many bars, 16 bars, it actually feels like quite a lot of work, this piece, from all the way through, because they're playing a lot. And they're doing a lot of different types of playing, and they're doing a lot of moving and sliding, all the rest of it. So it's a piece that tires them out quite a lot. But that's part of the thinking, is that now we need to build some stamina. So if you have any stamina, let's play Walk on Mars. So as soon as you hear the backing track start, you're going to land your spacecraft. It doesn't matter what string it is. You're going to make as much noise as you can. When I do this, you stop, and we get ready to play the tune. Here we go. A string hoedown. First thing I'll say is, why is this called A string hoedown? Because it's on the A string. The last line here, at this stage we often have quite a bit of differentiation. The last line is something everyone can join in with. It introduces the new rhythm. I'm not going to even tell them what it is. We might just play it. Stamp, 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 stamp. So that's the line we might learn first. Next thing, I'll look for patterns. What is the pattern? Are there any patterns in the first? The rhythm is the same pattern, right? Rhythm is by far the most abstract, complicated thing for children to understand notationally. So if you keep the rhythm really simple, then that's one complexity you're removing, and then they can focus on another complexity. As it's all on the A string, that's a really good opportunity to talk about letter names rather than fingers. So we call it A, B, B, C, C, B, B, C. And we'll do a lot of singing before we start to play it, because it's quite tricky to play with a backing track. So we'll do a lot of the singing with other gestures and all sorts of things like that. So they really get to know the tune before they even have a go playing it. I won't do that now. We're way ahead of schedule, behind schedule now. Rolling Hills is not French folk tune. How dare you, whoever said it. It is French folk tune, but do you know how paranoid I was when I printed this book? I was worried about people complaining about copyright, which is ridiculous because French folk tunes about older than France, so I don't know. But I actually thought, I'm going to change it anyway. I'm going to change it so that they start doing a little bit more scale work. So it's called Rolling Hills because you can see it goes up and down hills. It also teaches dynamics. We had a bit mentioned that earlier. This time crescendos and diminuendos. I just recently put in the repeat sign on the last line, which you might have been doing anyway, if you know this piece. Legato. I think legato is I mean, I teach legato for about the first 3 or 4 years of all my teaching. Legato is a sort of basis, at least, I don't know if everyone's different, but for me it's the basis behind all violin string playing because it's all about, we move legato, so we should play legato for quite some time. And it's only once you have a good legato that you can really start playing off the string because it's having real control between the bow and the string. But people are different, so I don't want to be too controversial. But that's we can talk about that at length another time. Fiery fiddler. Sometimes if I don't have time to teach kids, if their reading isn't very good, but I want them to play this piece anyway, I will write 2, 3, 2, D, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, and then I'll just say play A's in between. 2, 3, 2, D, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2. So in other words, you're condensing the explanation-y bit into just a few sentences so you can start getting the juice out of the music, you know, the useful stuff. The second page, how would you describe this? What is an easy way in for this second page, which is even more terrifying? What's the way in? It's a scale, and in fact that's all it is. It's a D major scale. So maybe I'll say, just play this. First time we're not going to go to the bottom, we're going to go back to the top. Then the second time we go to the bottom, okay? We do a couple of times. They can carry on doing that. That will work. It's still going to work with the backing track. They can do that. And then once they've done that, and I'll be like, you look like you're getting good at this. So I'm going to show you how to make it trickier. Instead of playing 2 notes, I'm going to put the other string in between each note. When I get onto the D string, I'm going to play A in between 1. That's something they can understand instantly, and they just want to get on with it. And they can see that it's tricky, but they want to get on with it. And the nice thing about this piece as well is that they can do it without accompaniment. It sort of accompanies itself, and it's a proper hoedown, not hoedown, Cayley sort of, I don't know, fiddler's type piece, right? And then the mission then is to just, if they're doing everything right, which at this point they should be, they can play it faster. So I would encourage them to tunnel the fingers so they don't up and down like this. But if they tunnel the fingers, then they can play it a lot faster. And the coordination-wise, it's incredibly useful. So we're really, at the end of this first book, we're really consolidating a lot of fundamentals, violin skills, string skills, which is why it's on all of the grade 1 syllabuses, in case anybody hadn't noticed.